Cool.
Yeah.
So shall I begin, or do you want to do an intro? Or
Just go right ahead. I can quickly mention your course actually. So Anton has a creature course, just about I guess it's presentation, what he's about to chat about. I'm going to press the link here. And we'll mention it after as well, but it's pretty much, he's going to go over, line cub animation, right? His workflow, processes, his ideas, and
basically the course is it's a 3-part sequence. So I'm using it as a foundation for because I've got a website that's being developed at the moment, and it's Dan Fotheringham, the quad blog guy. He's doing a course. Okay, you sharing screen, sweet.
yeah,
So Dan's doing an advanced quadruped course. Basically, a lot of courses that you see are reference based, and this is more about, like, Dan's course is more about workflow and how to do it, so you don't need reference. My little course is basically testing the water of the website, and I've been recording the process as I go for these the sequence of shots, and it's been super fun. So I was trying to get this page knocked out, so I couldn't really find a decent image. So excuse my picture at the top. The web developers were doing it for me, linked in with the site, so I couldn't just use like a Wix page or something like that, so I had to go through them. So it was a bit of a last minute thing. But anyway, so this is all reference based, and it's basically me going over the workflow that I've been using, and for all 3 sequences shots. So I'll show you. Can I share my screen here?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Can you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
Cool. So this is if I just play this sequence. So this is a work in progress. The only one that is pretty much done, although I keep seeing things. This is the thing, you never ever, as soon as you think it's done, it's never done. So, but this middle one is the closest one to being done. So, it comes a point where you just got to sign it off. The first one, I'll play this through in a sec, but the first one is something I'm working on at the moment. I'm just trying to kind of blend it between these two. And then, I'll play it through and you guys can see anyway. His head's a bit overcooked at the moment, but it's just a whip. So this is one that I've been blocking at the moment. All of this stuff at the middle, I'm going to chuck out. It's quite long, but this part is what I'm having a lot of fun with. So this, the whole course is geared around this build up of, the stalk, chase, fight. And the reason why I threw Mummy in the background is just obviously to give you a sense of scale, because, when you see these cubs on their own, you don't really know how, without seeing, the environment and stuff, you don't really know how big or small they are, even though we know they're cubs. But throwing Mum in, an adult lion, just shows you how small it is. So it kind of gives you that, cute factor. So he kind of sees his brother. And he starts giving chase.
So you obviously did the facial stuff later, right? Or
yeah. So I did all the facial stuff later, yeah. So like I said, all of this stuff here is a huge chunk I'm going to chuck out, and I'll briefly touch upon these shots later on. But you know, I wanted to do the bulk of the talk about this, how I got this from start to finish, but I'll briefly touch upon these ones. So this stuff here, all of the cameras are just purely for my use only, just for reference, seeing this as a personal test and not, you know, like in a studio. You know, I've got a lot of freedom with it, right? So I can do what I want. So once I'm happy with the mechanics of it, then I'll start throwing in my cameras. But right now I'm kind of just, you know, throwing in cheap cameras just to kind of help me with the mechanics. And, you know, you can do that in a studio as well. But yeah, there's a big chunk here that I'm just going to tear out. But for now, I'm trying to get in nuts and bolts. Cool. So any questions before we start on that?
I guess we're all kind of keen to see how you
All
get the shot. I guess that's the.
All right, so I'm basically gonna go back and where is it? Okay, so I'm gonna go through Sing Sketch and show you the steps I took, and then I'm gonna go into Maya and do a quick, you know, short little demos on how I did it and stuff. So feel free to jump in with any questions as I go. So basically, how I started was with. I should have included. I thought I included my reference in here, but I just basically I made a couple of spheres and I shaped them roughly, you know, as you can see, like a cub, just so I could kind of see. I wanted, you know, just a rough layout basically, and it's mainly for that and a rough camera pass, just to see how much ground they were going to cover. So it's just super rough. And without a reference in there or any objects, you know, you can't really tell what's going on. And then I went to, so this is my first kind of initial block. I think that's, hold on a sec. I think Sync Sketch has messed this up a little bit, the order. Is there a way to expand this so that I can see?
You should be able to drag it out.
Ugh.
Is that not working?
That's not letting me.
You can always, because you want to see the name, right?
Yeah.
If you exit out of this and go to a page up, you can quickly rearrange it from here just by dragging it. If you hover over like a video, there's a
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is I'll just show you this, guys, by the way. So this is like the final muscle pass. So I've got a small team of people that have been jumping on board, and you know, so I just want to give a shout out to them as well. So Christopher Makwana, I don't know if I pronounced that right. It's been super helpful in helping me with the muscle stuff. I don't know if you guys have seen, but there's been a lot of muscle posts and stuff like that. So he's been really helping with that. He's not really happy with it. I think he's awesome. But he's going to do it after the class. So he was trying to really help me for the talk. But after this, he's going to kind of go over it. And then we've got a fur pass. It's going to be all lit and rendered. It's going to look really nice once it's done, I think. The face is a bit funky. I don't know what's going on with the face. The weird blend shapes, I think, that have just been expanded. I don't know. But you get some really nice volume deformation and the belly jiggle and stuff like that. So it's nice to see your shot, you know, come alive like that. Like that belly jiggle there. So that's that. So I've got, you go from the first, the previs, and then all the way down to the muscle. But in between that, let's go to, let me find my block. Where's my block? So you can kind of see, like, the way I started it out, like, I didn't cover anywhere near enough ground. All right. So I got my reference and I started posing it out. Now, a few people ask me why I block in stepped, and I don't always do that. But I find that that's my kind of comfort zone, if you like. So whenever I'm trying to figure out mechanics or anything like that, sometimes, especially for interaction stuff, I like to, I found it really helps me animating in stepped or blocking in stepped, just so that I can, focus on a pose at a time. Because when I start scrubbing stuff, I just see, limbs and things moving about, and it's easy to, your brain gets tricked into, you seeing stuff move, and you get distracted quite easily. I do anyway. But I do work in a layered approach as well. So, this other shot, I was doing one of the later ones, and the one at the beginning where he just stands up, that is all layered. So the whole course that I'm doing is different approaches, but this main one is stepped. So I'll show you how I start doing that. So this is just like my main poses for this guy. And again, you can see how much ground I'm covering compared to my initial layout pass. It was kind of like a guess, I was guessing it. And then I'll show you the other one. So, this one wasn't so bad. It was just a few poses. And I was trying to do it so that I usually pick either front or back for contacts, because there's always going to be, when you got a contact on one, there's always going to be a passing pose on another limb, right? So whether it's a trot, walk, or a run, there's always going to be one contact and then one in a passing pose. So I like to just pick one end and then focus on that, and then I'll show you what I mean when I go into Maya. So this is that guy.
So you don't need the other cover there?
No, I was just showing you guys,
Okay, right.
those separately. So this is both of them. Super rough, just key poses. And I must admit, like, when I started doing this, it's quite hard to visualize how it's going to look, but you have to kind of trust your process. You have to trust in your ability, and know that, when you start adding breakdowns, it's going to start to flesh out. So I'll show you my breakdown pass. Actually, let me jump into Maya, and I'll show you quickly how I block. So this is my rig. By the way, I've got this rig from guys called misset.com. They sell it on Turbo Squid. Basically, I did a job for them, and during Lion King, I said, guys, you've got to make a cub, And they was like, oh, I'm not sure. I was like, trust me, it will sell, So I convinced them to make a cub. So I don't know how they're doing with it, but it's they rigged it using advanced skeleton, I think, and then I took it, tweaked it, and just did my own version. So yeah. So here I've got. I'm just going to reset everything now.
Anton, is that a free rig or is that a paid one? Like if we want to.
This one.
Yeah.
This one's a paid one, so this one will be available on, because I'm linked up with these guys now, Misset. So they're going to provide us my
Sure, yeah.
workshops with rigs. They're really nice. They've got fur. We've got a muscle system being set up for them. It's really nice. I'll show you. I think
they look nice and light in the light versions you have there.
Yeah, I'm about to show you guys. I don't know why I wrote cut. Thing is, like when I first opened, sorry, trying to multitask. Right, so this is the little guy.
Yeah, the line can.
Super cute.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, this is done with XGen or the fur, and we're having a bit of trouble at the moment trying to transfer it so you can simulate it and stuff. But we're getting there. So yeah, this is obviously available to buy through them or through one of our courses. We've got a wolf. We've got some other cool creatures as well. So, but basically, what I've done, I've turned it into my own rig because it's quite heavy at the start. So you'll probably see me do this a lot. I've got a marking menu that I use. I basically set up myself. Actually, I got it from a guy called Sammy. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Is it Sammy Fetchy? Or I don't know how you pronounce it. When I was at DNEG, he introduced me to this, and it's a really it's a really useful, you know, marking menu. So basically, I can select all of my rig, and I set this up. This works per studio as well, so this is dependent on a suffix. So if I go to my marking menu editor, this is a massive time saver. So anything you can do, any scripts, tools, shortcuts, you know, like things like Animbot, anything you can do to improve your workflow and speed it up, I definitely would do that. So if I right click on this and edit, so this relies on underscore control. So if you haven't got a suffix on your rigs, I'd recommend you get it. But most rigs have a suffix, so underscore control or CTL or whatever. So I've got one here at home on my rigs, and if I do a job for someone, I'll just, assuming it's got a suffix or a prefix, I'll just change that accordingly. So what that allows me to do is do things like, you know, select all. I can reset rotate. I can reset translate. And if I go to I've got a camera thing now, and I press one of my hotkeys, I think it's next to number 1. I can then toggle my cameras, which I do that a lot. A lot of people use 2 views or you know, like multi-views, and sometimes I do that, but it's just, you know, it's a habit that I've not got used to yet. So I tend to just switch my cameras as opposed to working in 3 views.
I use a Terra, yeah, but I think it slows down the playback. But
what, having multiple views?
Yeah, because
yeah,
I think it's trying to update both cameras at the same time. People.
Yeah, I do use that sometimes. Like if I need to play something where I've got, you know, my camera view, and then I need to see, you know, I need to check a silhouette or something like that, but I can't select it because I'm in my perspective view. I do that sometimes, but mostly I toggle between cameras like that.
Where did you get your script from for that toggle?
I think it's called @toggle cams. Yeah, @toggle cams. Aaron Koressel. So I'll send you guys a link. Like, he's got some superb scripts. And I can't remember exactly how you set it up, but you have one button as a shelf. So that basically sets up what cameras you want. So render camera, and I don't know, let's go front. And you have to be in one of those cameras first, but then it toggles those two cameras. So for me, obviously, I just have render camera and perspective. So it's, you know, super useful. But I'm not opposed to working like this either. But it's just, you know, habit. You know, everyone's got their own workflow, and sometimes things are hard to break. So this is my rig. I've got my global control here. So I can change it to proxy or medium. This is actually an old version of the rig. I've got different LODs. So I've got proxy, medium, high, and fair, but you know, you don't need that for this. This is my old block-in, so hence the old rig. It's quite useful to learn rigging as well. Like I've just taught myself over the years, so I'd never go and apply for a rigging job. I'm not that good, but I'm confident enough to be able to, you know, work my way around a rig pretty good. So
as an animator,
sorry,
do you think that helps as an animator?
yeah, I do. Yeah, 100%. We got rigs at work, and sometimes, you know, they can be pretty slow sometimes, you know, because the way they deform and stuff. So sometimes you're not always lucky to get super fast rigs, you know, and it depends on what Maya's using. Like as you go like 19 and 20 and Maya 21 and whatever, it's going to, you know, they're going to become real time, the way things are going. But you know, right now, you know, it's that having rigging knowledge is really good for that, because I basically took a rig at work and I saved it on my desktop, and I just stripped it because I knew that I could copy out the curves anyway. So it's not something that I'd recommend doing, you know, because obviously it's, you know, it's not pipeline friendly. But when you've got things like Studio Library, if I just open it up, like stuff like this, you know, when you can, if you select all your controls, and then, you know, you can just write out animation. As long as you can write out animation and save animation somewhere using DKanim or Studio Library, you know, I definitely recommend making yourself a fast usable rig. But you know, most studios are really going to do it for you anyway. And I'll probably do a video at some point how I did this to make a proxy rig. It's really easy to do. You know, you just duplicate the mesh, simplify it, break it up, parent constrain all of these parts to the joints, and done. It's not that hard.
So it's all parent constrained.
Sorry?
Is it all parent constrained?
Yeah. So on the right, on my channel box, it's all parent constrained, so it's, you know, it's super fast. But the reason why I like doing this, apart from the speed, is so that I can hide the legs. You know, I think it's super important to hide the legs. And that's, you know, that's a shout out I'm going to give to Dan Fotheringham. You know, I learned a lot of tips and tricks through his blog and through his help and stuff like that. So yeah, but hiding the legs is a must for me. So anyway, let's begin. So I've got this one character, and this is an old file, so I've only got these keys at the moment. So when I block in stepped, like I said, for this I really wanted to do stepped purely because it's pose dependent, and obviously when they're interacting, I want to key on both. So, you know, I don't really want to be having things swim around and stuff. So when they're contacting each other, I want to key on this cub, key on this cub. So let me just move my reference down. Oops. So I've only got one cub in here right now. Where's my other cub?
If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them or post it up. I'll read it out for you.
All right, cool. So I've only got one cub in at the moment, so I'm just going to move this out to the side. And obviously I'll make sure I'm in stepped. I'll try and be brief with this as well, because obviously I'll cover a lot of this in the course, and I don't want you guys getting bored. So I'm not going to like block out a whole scene, but I'll just show you kind of how I get into my flow, and then
No,
I'll
fine.
go to next phase.
Yeah, people are here for that reason, to see, you know, your thought process, how you
Yeah.
And previous webinars have gone up to 3 hours.
Cool. All right. Okay. All right. So I'll select. I'll select all. Let's make this a little bit bigger, actually. So what I'm looking for when I'm blocking is obviously foot placements. Just seeing how far I've got to go with this. At some point, another thing that I've learned from Dan and a few awesome people when I worked with MPC was to bake stuff off the root control. And, you know, so eventually the root control will just stay where it is, and then you're just working world space with these guys. And when I first heard that, I thought it was insane. I was like, I didn't understand why you would do that. But when I get to that, I'll explain why.
Actually,
So,
question on that. Do you
yep.
have a baking script for that?
Yes, yeah, I do. It's called, again, it's another thing that I've got from Dan. It's called JT Locators, I think.
Okay.
I'll find a link for it and I'll send it to you. It's the best, like, this I came across in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And for me, it's probably one of the biggest game changers I've had in the 10 years that I've been in the industry.
I use the same thing at work right now, and yeah, it's done the same thing for me as well.
It just opens up a whole new world. Like, it just lets you animate free.
Yeah.
Like, we're at the moment, like, you see all these controls, right, and you're so constrained by what this is doing, and then you're like, you know, you're countering stuff, and as soon as you constrain stuff to locators, and I'll show you guys why I do that in a bit and how, it blew my mind at how powerful it is. But I'll come back to that in a bit. But basically, with that, it allows me to be super free with this guy. You know, you learn from people as you go through your career, and you know, some people say, "Oh, I wouldn't animate." You know, I'd only let me just quickly turn off auto cue. I'm just going to select all. You know, so you got this at 0, and a lot of people they would move this guy around. And I'm not saying this is wrong, by the way. This is completely valid. They move this around, and they would only use it to steer, and they wouldn't animate it in rotate X, rotate Z, purely because, you know, to keep stuff clean. And that's completely valid. I completely agree with that to a point. Then on the other end of the spectrum, I've worked with people that block their whole shot just with these two guys. So they completely block it like this. And I found that insane. I was like, why would you do that? So I kind of found a bit of a happy medium. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just the way I do it. But I know that I can use this like a toy and just do whatever it needs to be done to get a job done, to make a pose or whatever, because I know eventually I'm going to be jumping over to this and baking stuff off anyway. So I need to be thinking about how I can get my goal, and how I can, you know, what can I get for free, you know, rather than just, you know, if you know, some people they'll pose it like this, but they will zero out these guys, and then they would translate this up because they want their, you know, their root to be clean, which is cool, is completely valid. But yeah, for me, I just want to see what I can get for free when I block. So this has been the biggest game changer for me. I wish I had this years ago. I did use ML World Bake, I think is a similar thing, but this super powerful. I'll cover this later on. So anyway, let me delete that. There you go. So what I'm looking for is to obviously pick a pose that, you know, this is a nice pose here. I think I went with this one before. You know, this is a nice dynamic pose. You know, try and steer clear if you can for stuff like this. It doesn't always have to be about foot contacts. You know, if you chose a foot contact every time, you're going to miss opportunities like this to get a nice, decent pose, as opposed to, okay, I've got this, and then my next foot contact is that. Okay, so naturally you'd think, okay, well, I'm just gonna move this guy back. I'll probably start with the foot. And I can, no. And then this is why I switch stuff. Oops, oh, I've got to change it. Here we go. You know, just try and be like free with it. But anyway, so what I was saying is, you know, I've got that foot contact. Let's just key that. So I've got that foot contact in, but I'm missing that next pose, which is for me is more dynamic, right? So I'm gonna delete that, and I'm gonna set a key on everything now. And I know that's a little skip back. So I would say for me, the thing that's going to be driving this is this hand, you know, the front left paw. If you watch where it pivots, I'm going to use that as my kind of guide. So if that's there, I'm going to bring that down about there like this. Oops. And now I've got that. Let's copy that. Oops. And then that foot comes up again. I'm just doing this to kind of work out the distance for that that next pose, right? So it's planted, it's planted, it's planted, and then it comes up. And now I can work off that foot. You see that angle? So that's what I'm looking for. Now, when you're blocking a layered approach, you know, I can completely get why people would look at this and go, this is insane. I can do this in about 10 minutes with layered. But for me, again, I liked, the reason why I did it was so that I could get nice pose in, and you know, it was really important that you know, I took advantage of that, especially when they're interacting. So so now I know where that foot is. I'm looking for this angle here on that front right foot. Yeah, so now I know that I can bring this guy back. I can bring him down. And if I 2D pan and zoom that, this is the other thing that I was having as well. Like there was a lot of backwards and forwards with cameras, and it got to a point where I was trying to do a nice camera move from the get-go, but I was really trying to pay attention to what the reference was doing as well, and I couldn't get the right camera move, and I knew that it was going to be rough until the very end in regards to camera moves. And then my friend at work, my HOD, Chris Hutchison, he helped me. He just redid my camera. So it's basically, you know, again, we wanted to go for that documentary feel where the camera's not on a track, it's not moving around, it's just panning. And the final camera was a lot nicer. But yeah, up until that point, from start to finish, it was a lot of backwards and forwards of the cameras. Is a nightmare. Not a nightmare, you know what I mean. So anyway, I'm going to 2D pan and zoom that. Just move that over a little bit. And then again, I'm looking for this angle. Now, obviously, when I'm doing this in real time, I'm not going to be talking through this. So I'm going to be moving a lot quicker than this. But, you know, I'm showing you my process. So again, just keep making sure that things are working. We want to get that curved over right. And that's probably too high. And then based off that one, if we set a key on everything, just so that we're sure, I can go back to this, I can delete that. And now I'm looking at this foot. So just seeing where this foot goes. So now that's contacted, right? So now that comes over, comes up and over and swings through. And then that lands about there, I think. And obviously if you've got like I said at the beginning, I recently came across, thanks to my friends at work, Animbot. Amazing tool. I used to use A-Tools, but I had migrated over thanks to my friends at work. So it's super cool. So with that, you can have selection sets and things like that, but I haven't just, it's on my shelf, but I haven't clicked on it to install it at the moment. So, right, so now let's look at the back feet, where the back feet goes. So that's just a simple hop back. So let's do that. Oops, not on that pose. Now, when this goes for all quads, or most quads, when animals go back, you know, or they sit down, I see a lot of this, you know, where the ankles are up. You know, don't be afraid to sit them down on the floor. Let's look for the other one. So it's also a hop back, and probably a little bit further behind. And just make sure it's working in all views. Like this is that's probably too far. And again, this is why, thanks to the locators now, you know, I'm not so worried about rotating this guy around. So all I want to do is just, you know, just get my pose, and however it takes to do that, I don't care. And also, you know, this does seem like a painstaking process, but again, I am talking through it, so it is a lot slower. But Remember, I'm getting the nuts and bolts down. So while someone would be doing a layered approach and being a lot quicker off the get-go, when it comes to, you know, further down the line, and when I go to spline my stuff, I spline it when I'm on like 2s, 3s, and 4s. So my stuff is in a pretty good place as it is, and I'll show you a spline pass when in a bit. You know, for something like this, when I first splined it, I thought it was going to be a complete mess, and it was surprisingly, you know, not that bad. It was still a lot of work, obviously, but I thought it was going to be you know, a mess.
So do you work out your poses first then before your like timing and rhythm and everything? And I guess that's reference too, right?
Yeah, so obviously when you've got reference, it really helps. And when you got a shot in a studio, sometimes you can't find that reference. Sometimes you've got to piece together different references. Like for me, this was always a study, you know. So you know, although I'm kind of like rotoing, I did it because I wanted to improve my eye. And see how far I can push my skill set, and you know, see how far I can go with it. You know, there was a lot of different reasons why I did that, but reference 100%. If you can ever use reference for anything, you know, why would you try and wing it? You know. I saw something the other day that someone did, and the thing is, like no one's going to remember in 2 years' time something you did and goes, oh yeah, that guy rotoed that. No one's going to remember that. They're going to see a shot and go, oh, that's cool. But you know, if you try and wing it and try and do it on your own, not that it's wrong, because it's good to practice without reference, I think sometimes, but it's definitely not going to look as good as with reference. And if you're, especially if you're a student and you're trying to wing it, you know, you're going to miss out on a hell of a lot. And I think that, you know, you need to know mechanics, and you need to know, you know, animal mechanics and gaits and things like that, and foot patterns. But you know, I think you're just selling yourself short if you do a personal test or at work and you don't use reference, you know.
Yeah, I still find like a lot of like grabbing it directly from reference and putting it into 3D, that transition is still a big task, because if you directly put it on, it's not going to look as good as a reference. So there's still need to understand and learn
No, absolutely.
and 3D animation.
No, absolutely. No, you definitely need to know, you know, you have to have a good understanding of mechanics of, you know, it's not just, there's a lot more to it than just roto and stuff. Like I've seen stuff roto before, and it's like, you know, it looks a bit rough. You can tell that it's just copied. But anyway, so with this, I've got, you know, if you're looking at the reference, there's a pull on this where he pulls his shoulder. So I'm trying to kind of get that in as well. And then, so that's that. And then select all. I'll just set another key, and then I'll show you how I'll do my breakdowns. So where would I pick? Now I can't remember what I did, but that's a cool pose. You know where you get this nice arc in the body. That's that C shape there. But again, I would probably do that in a breakdown. So and again, what would I pivot? You got to think about your pivot points as well, and what's going to be driving that pose. So in terms of like, what do I mean by that? So again, I'm looking for pivots for the foot. So let's say you're doing a character shot, right? And you've got someone you know, someone's throwing a punch, or, you know, getting out a gun and doing that. If I was to block that, the whole drive is that hand, right? So you get, if let's say you're doing an IK, you get that hand and you pose it out. Well, that is driving all of your mechanics. So if you do that, that's your driver, and then everything pivots around that. So, you know, you get your shake in the chest, your shoulder. How does that chest affect the hips? How does it affect the head and the neck? But it all pivots around that. So that's why I'm saying what's going to be the driver for my next pose. So I would say this hand here. So at the moment it's there, and then it comes down there. So I'm just going to move it here just so that I've got a little guide. And I'm not going to pose it on there. But now I can use that as my pivot. So I'd probably say that's a cool pose. So now I can have that come up a little bit like that, and then use that as my pivot, right? If that makes sense. So I'm going to select my chest and my hips, and I'm going to go reset, rotate, reset, translate. And again, we want this outstretched arm here. So let's reset our shoulders, our scaps. And again, if we go to 65, we've got to think about where that's pivoting around from. So this is the pivot point in terms of where it's pivoting away from. So this is a pivot point here. So that the front feet are going to come in, and you're going to almost kind of get this triangle shape, you know, like this. But what I'm saying is, you know, the angle of it, maybe my angle needs to be a bit more, you know, does it need to be a bit more like that? Because now if you look at it, he's definitely come over a little bit. So on this pose here, when he falls, and I can just refine that pose with these guys. So he's definitely, you know, he's traveled a little bit. So let's bring that up. So figuring all this stuff out is pretty fun. And again, for me, if I was doing this a layered approach, I can assure you it would be a lot quicker. But for me personally, it would be a mess. It would take me a long time to kind of get it looking nice. But you know, I do work layered in most cases. But for something like this, like I said before, it's just my comfort zone, you know. And when I started Creature as well, I couldn't get my head around why anyone would block in steps, you know, because you want a nice natural flow, right? But again, if you've got reference, and this is why I did a layout pass at the beginning, you know, because I'm not restricting myself, so I can kind of see how far they're going to go. But then when I started adding in my poses were, the distance covered was a hell of a lot further than it was when I did the layout pass anyway. So I'm just going to do this one more pose, and then I'll show you how to do my breakdowns. Set key, set key, set key. And then I think the head is up at that point. The breakdown part for me is fun because you've figured out you've done the hard work, and it's just a case of going in, and I've got another script for that. I'll show you. It's just an in between step tween, I think, another Aaron Koressel script, but it just allows me to block in steps super fast. And again, you can use Tween Machine or anything like that. Animbot's got his own, so I'll probably be migrating to that soon. But again, it's just because I use this marking menu, I throw in poses really, really quick just by, you know, it's like a paintbrush for me. And I'll show you what I mean in a bit. So let's see where that foot's going now. So it's contacted there, and I haven't got a pose there yet, so I'm just going to delete that. I just needed that as a guide. So now that foot's come over. And it still hasn't got a straight arm. You see that? Like my arm's too tucked in. So I'm probably going to either move it back or move it to the side a little bit, like the full body, just so that I can get more of a straighter arm. But then this is going to affect my next pose. So it's a lot of backwards and forwards. But once you get it right, you know, it's a good feeling knowing that you've got the, you know, good foundations to work from. And obviously, you know, we've got this nice shape here. It's not just like a straight pose I've got. So I need to work that out. So let's go delete that. And now I'm going to use my step tween, right? So I'll go there, and that didn't give me a nice pose at all. So I'm going to manually pose that.
Hey, Anton, quick question for you.
Yep.
Abhishek, he asks, how do you judge the spacing when there are no elements in the background? Like how much can be covered for the character?
Yeah, it's a good question. I use feet as a guide. So I use my paws. Again, you know, I look at this pose here, and I've got, normally, you know, in a studio or personal test, you've got some sort of ground modeled. And if I show you guys, where are we? I think I did a pass because I was showing friends as I was going, and that's another really important thing, you know, apart from reference. I think the biggest thing that people miss out on is showing their work, because, you know, as much as you're looking at your work and you're improving your eye and you're training your eye, you're always going to miss stuff. So, you know, showing friends is really important. So when it started to when it came to a point where I was happy with it, I started throwing in basic spheres, so that it was good reference. It was a good guide for me, but it was important that I showed, you know, when I started showing my work. So if I go, so there's my breakdowns. So that's not a good example. But you can, what I'm saying is you can see the spheres I've added, right? So if I show you this one, you know, it gives you a good, you know, guide to where things are. But yeah, in terms of the way I started blocking this, because I had nothing, it was just a flat plane. I was just using the feet as a kind of reference point. So wherever this foot in the reference traveled, like from that pose to there, if you remember, I went from there, and I kind of just guessed how far that would swing down, right? So then I added a pose here. I knew that contacted there, so I set a kind of fake key there, and then it went from there to there. So if I copy that and then paste it a couple of frames back, that would have been about there. Now if I select everything else and then just do a step tween, just as a kind of guide, you can kind of see, again, if I do a step tween again, just as a guide, you can kind of see that where that foot's going, right? Obviously I would need to add in a pose, but you know, that comes, I think for me, when you haven't got stuff in your scene, it just comes down to experience. But yeah, I would definitely use limbs and feet and hands as a guide. So let's delete that. So I'll go there, and then it comes up. Now, obviously this one is messed up. Oh, okay, so there it is. You see that? So that's why I chose that pose, I think. So it's because it, you know, it came up and over. And one thing that I want to share with you guys as well, like pole vectors, I hate in body space. However, when you're moving stuff about, when you're posing stuff about, you want everything else to come along for the ride if possible. So you just want to do whatever it takes to, you know, get that pose, right? So I don't want to be moving this guy and then moving this one. Later on, I'll start locking stuff down using baked locators. But for now, I don't mind pole vectors moving around because I'm just setting one pose, so it doesn't really bother me. And it's good practice as well to, you know, maybe use an art tracker. It's not something I usually do in blocking. I just kind of use it as a rough, you know, my eye as a guide. You know, I've got a pose there, I've got a pose there, I've got a pose there. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident that's going to be a good art. So this pose I need to fix a little bit. So maybe just bring it down a little bit. Maybe it's further that way. This one always bothered me, this pose, trying to get that match. And there we go, because the motion blur, sometimes it's hard to pick poses.